Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Guild podcast, a podcast all about the experiences and memories that board games with friends and family can create. On today's episode, we're going to discuss area control games. So before we dig into it, the definition of area control games, at least according to BGG, is multiple players may occupy a space and gain benefits based on their proportional presence in that space. In El Grande, for instance, players earn their score in a region by having the most caballeros in that region. And strangely enough, we just played El Grande in preparation for this episode. So, good example.
Yeah, I would say El Grande is definitely, in the playthrough, I've called it basically the grandfather of area control, and I think that's fairly apt. It is a very traditional area control where you have periodic scoring throughout the game, and you score each region by whoever has the majority, second most majority, third most majority. It does have a nice, interesting element of a hidden area control, which is the tower, where you're throwing in cubes or meeples, depending on which version of El Grande that you have, into this tower that's concealing them, and then you kind of have to remember how many people each person has in there, so when you score it, you have an idea how you're doing. Other than that, let's talk about those elements first. What did you guys think of the area control element of El Grande?
It was the first time I played El Grande. I must say that I found it to be quite interesting. It wasn't a winner-take-all scenario in terms of scoring. That was kind of interesting, compared to like a more traditional dudes on a map style game. In a typical board game that represents a war like Risk, only one player can control any given area. In this game, multiple players could be in an area, and because we were playing 4 players, 3 of those 4 players could score off of one area, which was sort of my strategy while as I was playing the game. I was trying to get second place in a couple areas rather than totally blow out a few.
So, Peter, what's your thoughts on the area control element?
Well, for me, I think what Dan was saying is kind of where my thought was that I wasn't so used to the fact where you were scoring second and third place in an area. I think probably one of the few games that maybe I've played going into this that felt a little bit area control, been something along the lines of Dune. But in Dune, once you get 2 groups into a space, there's going to be some fighting that's going to happen. And so you didn't have this added aspect of everybody staying in the space. There wasn't that whole fighting aspect. It was getting enough people in there so that you were either scoring first, second, or third. And so not being quite as used to that, I didn't have the same insight that Dan had, which is, maybe I'm just shooting to get second or even third in a space, but that I'm trying to get a little bit everywhere. I think through most of the game, I was very focused on a couple areas and didn't think too much about spreading out further across the map as much as I probably should have now, like having time to really look back on the game and think about it. So I found it to be very interesting and a mechanic that I'm hoping to look into more. So I'm hoping to get introduced to some other games that have this same kind of style. And so usually, like usual, I'm looking to you guys to find out what are some other games like El Grande when it comes to their take on the area management.
Yeah, I just want to mention one of those areas that you latched onto happened to be Nathan's home base.
I had it out for Nathan a little bit.
Yeah.
It didn't help, but I had it out for him.
Which is another interesting element of El Grande specifically, because your home base, as well as whatever region the king is located in, is disproportional scoring. If you win your home base, it's worth 2 more points, but only for you. Like, you winning Nathan's home base doesn't get the extra 2 points.
Right, it just keeps the extra 2 points from him.
Yeah, right. It just gives me a hard time. It makes my game a little hard.
Which actually, I believe it de-incentivizes the competition for those spaces. In general, if a space is going to be worth 6 victory points for me, then I can invest 6 cubes, meeples, knights, or caballeros is what the game calls them, in that area to secure those points. That's a good investment for me. Another person who is looking in that area and sees that they need to beat my 6 in order to make only 4 points, that's not so hot for them.
Yeah, getting second and third place in an area, second or third place, is not really that bad. You want to, score as many areas as possible, and that's pretty typical of area control. And Peter did talk about one of the elements that is slightly different. There is really no combat in this game, but that's not to say it doesn't have take that elements. and we can talk about that a little bit, is take that elements in this game mainly happens in the card mechanic, which I really like this card mechanic where you have a hand of cards. Those cards have numbers on them. They're one-time use. The numbers also have numbers of meeples that you get into your resource pool, but you're basically using them to bid for turn order at picking the ability cards that allow you to have really cool abilities and determine how many meeples you actually get to place on the board. So it's like a double layer card effect game with multi-purpose card, and these abilities, a lot of them can be pretty take that. You can be taking other people's meeples off the board, emptying out the reserve of meeples so that they don't have anything to really use on their turn. A lot of things like that. That's pretty fun.
The card play mechanism at hand in El Grande is certainly interesting. Like you said, it's a dual layer, right? Because there's one set of cards that everyone shares. Everyone's got the same, 12, 13 cards at the beginning of the game that they use to bid for effectively turn order. But those cards also determine, like you said, how many of those cubes or knights come out of your inaccessible pool and into your accessible pool. I found it rather interesting that there isn't a lot of mobility of those pieces once they hit the board. There's a couple cards that can move knights around once they hit the board or force them to leave and go back to the supply. But once they're on their board, they don't move too much.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things. So it's one of the cards that you can bid for, there's always one that allows you to move stuff, but it's the one that allows you to put out the fewest people. So while there's always an option, it's a struggle to decide whether to use that because it's really important to get as many pieces out as you can. So yeah, you're giving up a lot by choosing to move things on the board.
And the fact that once you put pieces out, they effectively stay there is counterbalanced by the limitation imposed by the king. The king's region itself cannot be altered. And when you're deploying new units, you can only deploy them to regions that are adjacent to whatever region the king is in. Typically, if the region is somewhere near the center of the map, this is going to exclude one or two regions from your choices. We had a large portion of our game where the king was stuck in a corner, and our choices 2 or 3 instead.
Yeah, these things happen.
Yeah, it's part of the strategies because one of the things that's always available is the ability to move like the king. And you can move it into places to limit what other people can do because they have to place adjacent to the king. So they can make sure, they can't go in this area that you want to keep them out of because it's so far away, it's really inaccessible, or it's covered by the king. For the card mechanic, that's one of the things that for the base game, it's really nice, but it can get a little samey. So if you get this game, I really highly suggest either get the big box or at least get the King and Intrigue expansion, because that gives you more cards, and what these cards do is they actually put some of the powers on the cards, as well as the ones that are on the board are just default basic. They're not going to be constantly changing like the base game. But since you have more cards, you then have to, at the beginning of the game, pick which 13 you want to keep for the game. You no longer know exactly what everybody has in their hand. So it's an interesting way of changing up. It's a small change, but it's a major mechanical change that has a large impact.
Yeah, you mentioned that while we were doing our playthrough. I would want to try that at least once to see how it flows, but I think I'm going to probably prefer the way the base game runs with it. I like them giving me different options and me having to make lemonade out of lemons sometime.
Right. It gives it a lot more replayability, as that's the main aspect of those expansions. So yeah, sometimes I'll throw in the expansion, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll just play with the base game, and so it just changes it up. I guess we have to talk a little bit about the look of El Grande.
I mean, it's not a pretty game, and it is somewhat dated, right? Yeah. Is this what you're getting at?
Yeah, it's the colors are muted. They did do the big box, and there was an anniversary edition where they upgraded the looks, but it's still pretty dated looking. They didn't make significant changes. I think they wanted to keep it as true to the original as possible. So it looks dated. Colors are very muted. But I also think as far as the graphic design, those muted colors really make it very readable. The iconography is very simple. I didn't really have to explain much of anything from the cards. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, from a functional perspective, I would say it's very functional.
For me, look doesn't play a huge part in the games that I play. As long as the person who's teaching it to me enjoys the game and is passionate about it, I'm usually all in to learn a game. And as long as the game seems to run well and be very well thought through and the mechanics work, for me, the look of a game is fairly low down there. I mean, I like a pretty game like anybody else. I think the thing that I enjoyed about about it. I enjoyed the fact that the map was meant to look scroll-like. You get that little bit of a curl down at one corner that kind of messed a little bit with the, like, wondering about the scoring in there. But overall, I kind of liked the antique map look that they went with. And yeah, maybe it is kind of dated, but it doesn't bother me at all. And so I thought the game, like you guys had said, it's an older game, but it's a classic. It's kind of it's the grandfather of this mechanic. And so there's a reason it's still around. There's a reason people keep playing it. It's probably not because of the look of the game. It's probably because it's just a really good game. I think the look is fine.
Yeah, full disclosure, even after only one play, if I had to rate this game, I would rate it pretty highly because it's like very solid.
Yeah, James likes to make fun of me because I like a lot of games that look bad. This would be the middle range. I mean, I have some games that are just quite ugly. But, if there's strong mechanisms, strong gameplay, I can overlook a bad look. Mainly where games have to have a good look is like Kickstarter, when you know nothing about the game beyond the way it looks. That's when you have to really have a good-looking game.
And again, like I said, I mean, I like a pretty game. I like beautiful artwork. I like it when the art and the functionality work together and they blend. But in the end, for me personally, it sounds like probably for you too, Nathan, it's pretty low down there. I'm just looking for a good game. And if it doesn't look great, that's okay. I can put enough passion behind selling a game to somebody else, to telling them about it, that more than likely we can get past what it looks like and just enjoy the game itself. But again, I don't think that this one is an ugly game. Maybe that's just my opinion. I didn't think it was ugly. I like that old map look, and so I enjoyed the iconography on it. The cards are a little bland, but it's a deck of numbered cards. That's the way that is. But the board itself, I like.
Pete, you're a self-abashed thematic gamer, and a lot of thematic games have very good artwork because it helps you draw into the story. So I'm just wondering, but then you also say that the art isn't too important. So is it not the art that draws you into the thematic games that you like?
I don't think I've ever thought about it in that sense and thought, man, this art is really making me feel, and probably does, but maybe on a subconscious level. Most of the time for me, it's just, is there story here? Is there substance? So a lot of it can be writing in thematic games. I mean, everybody who listens and has heard me talk about it knows that I love Betrayal, and it's because each thing has a mission and there's a story that's being told, which again is what sold me on the campaign style of the Betrayal Legacy. It just ratcheted that whole thing up a notch. I mean, it's got it's okay art probably thrown in there, but it's definitely not the thing that caught my attention the most. I would say probably the game that I've played most recently that just like pops into my head, that like you're saying is just thematic and then beautiful art, and I noticed the art and it helped sell me on it, would have been Mysterium. But that's because the art is that game. You are literally trying to help people figure out the mystery from the pictures. So I kind of had to notice the art a little bit more there. But yeah, I don't think art and theme is the biggest seller for me. A lot of the time it's the writing or the setting that the game finds itself in, I guess. But hey, I mean, good art never hurts. It's only going to make it better.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your thoughts there.
Yeah.
So we probably should move on to other area controls, unless there's anything else you want to say about El Grande before we move on.
I think if there's anything else to be said about El Grande, it's going to be comparing other area control games to it. So let's name some area control games. I will name one in honor of James, who is not here tonight. Twilight Imperium 4th Edition, which we've all played at least once. James would be first to mention this game more than likely. Certainly has an area control element, since you need to control a planet in order to produce resources, to build spaceships, and also to vote on the laws that get passed in the second half of the game. Also, there are some objective cards that ask you to control planets, certain kinds of planets. So there's that as well.
So thinking about El Grande and then thinking about Twilight Imperium 4th Edition, I think I had the same issue in that game that I did in El Grande, and that is I didn't spread out nearly enough. I think I kind of got my starting location, I doubled down on controlling that area, and then didn't go out and expand enough. And again, that's, you've got to be able to control your area, but at the same time, you've got to be willing to take those those risks to move out so that you can get the benefits that you're going to get from the other spaces. And so I think that's something that I'll need to work on with myself as I start to try to play other area management or area control games, mitigating the risks but knowing when to take them.
Yeah, Twilight Imperium, though, even though combat is not like a huge focus of the game, it is definitely more so than El Grande. And even if you're not directly competing, there is always that sense that combat is just around the corner. That, you know, if you mess something up, expose yourself, you're always just trying to play defensively and avoid people trying to wipe you out. The one I want to talk about is Age of Empires 3, or also known as Empire's Age of Discovery, after they lost the license. But this is also a fairly traditional area control game, but they break it into two halves. So you got one half of the game that's worker placement, and then the second half of the game that is area control. So you're doing the worker placement first to decide in the area control phase where your people are going to go, what abilities they're going to have, what people you'll get for next turn. Then you go and take all these people from the worker placement, put them into the colonies. In this one, you're colonizing United States. So if people have a problem with games about colonialism, that might be an issue here, but it is history. So it is a thing that did happen. I like to forgive that. Now, when you colonize the states or regions of this United States, the person who has majority reaches a certain number with meeples within a colony first, gets the resource that's there, but during the scoring, it is majority. So whoever is first gets more points than the person gets second. And then there's a little bit of combat in that game where certain unit types can actually fight, but there's only one type of unit in the entire game that actually can be really used in combat. So it's minimal, the combat in that game.
Yeah, the game has multiple kinds of workers, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I vaguely remember it was probably the Age of Empires 3 version of this game. It had a bunch of plastic and different shaped plastic minifigs to represent all the different kinds of workers, right?
Yeah, I have the newer version of the game, the Empire's Age of Discovery, which has pretty decent looking little minis. Nothing like compared to CMON, but it's just the old fashioned style plastic minis that are, distinct and easy to spot. Yeah, and then you have a couple different types of units, and all they really do is one type will give you a little extra bonus when you're colonizing. Another will give you an extra bonus if you're trying to get resources. Another one will get you a bonus if you're trying to get ships, which ships are basically wild resources. So yeah, and the one thing I really like about this game is the fact that it's worker placement and area control means they can put all the information you need on the board. And it is very easy to run through this game and teach how it works. For a really complex game, I can teach people who have never played any board games before and have a reasonable belief that they'll actually be able to play this game and do well.
All right, you convinced me. I'm going to add it to my playlist. I'm going to track this down. I'm going to find it on Tabletop Simulator or play it with you at some point down the road.
I could absolutely teach you this game anytime you want. It is one that every time I do a top 10, I just think about putting it on the list, but never quite makes it.
Fair enough.
But I've played enough games. It's a very small selection of my games that actually could ever make my top 10.
So, of course, another game that has an element of area control in it that we should probably discuss, albeit briefly, is the game Scythe. We recently played Scythe together, the four of us. There's a video playthrough on the YouTube channel, and we discussed it in depth, the game mechanisms and interactions for our last podcast. So I don't think we have to say too much about Scythe, other than there is an area control element. The area control element is in control of regions on the board, since that is one of the things that is worth victory points at the end of the game. The factory can be a point of contention since it's worth 3 hexes at the end of the game. And depending upon how many players are in the game, they might jostle against each other and or try to aim for resources as the game progresses.
So Scythe is another one where, and I feel like this is becoming a bit of a theme with the area control and management, is that, there is some combat, but it doesn't have to be a huge part of the game. You have the opportunity of getting 2 of the rewards or whatever for combats. Is it 2 for combats in Scythe, I think?
Yeah, you can claim up to 2 stars for successfully completing combats.
Yeah. So for combats. But again, it's not a massive thing. It's not the main focus of the game. So I guess as somebody, again, who hasn't played as many games as you all, then is there area control, area management games where combat is a huge focus.
Would you consider Dune to have a huge focus?
Well, I mean, Dune, I definitely think it does, because I mean, as soon as you have to fight to control the places. So Dune's like the one that I know for sure that does.
Right. And in
But
Dune,
is it common? Is it common among those types of games? Is it common that the combat is a main focus or a big focus, or is it more common that it's not?
I would say it kind of depends on the game. A lot of the area control games that I've played are non-combative.
Is that just because that's the style you like?
Yeah, I guess. Only Nexus Ops is really a dudes on a map style game. That's area control because, you're trying to control the spaces that have the rubium mines on it, which is the resource that you use to buy more units. And you're also the other point of contention on the map is the center hex, because whoever controls that can draw 2 cards at the beginning of their turn. And those energized cards can help swing the game in your favor in small but meaningful ways.
I think there's also the factor that even though combat is technically a form of air control, we tend to classify games with heavy combat as simply a combat game rather than an area control game. It's just a slight.
So it's like
semantic.
It's still an area control game. Like Dune is still an area control game, but would you start to consider it then more of just a combat game?
I don't think so, because there's so much more going on in Dune than just the combat. There's a lot of politicking and resource management.
Yeah, I mean, it's largely combat and negotiation, but area control does actually factor in quite a bit.
I was going to say,
because the objective.
Because it's the whole objective is controlling at least 3 of those 5 locations on the map, or 4 if you're in a treaty with somebody or an alliance. So, okay, I mean, I know me, and I think so far the games that I have played that are probably considered area management, area control, I prefer the ones with combat.
That's right, because you've also done a lot of Blood Rage online, right?
I have played a lot of Blood Rage online, and I really enjoy the combat factor. And of course, I feel like the majority of the ones that I do like, I like the card-based mechanic combat as compared to the I'm just gonna roll some dice and see if I win. I like there to be some strategy involved with the combat rather than just luck. The luck can definitely play into it, but I like being able to think my way through the strategy, albeit that I usually lose, but I still think it's fun. So I guess that's where I'm leaning as I'm learning some of these games, and I'm learning area control and area management games. I definitely lean towards the ones that have combat so far. But I was wondering again, is that, in the large scale of all the games out there that are area control, 50-50, some of them are combat, some of them are not combat, or is it most of them have at least some form of combat in there? So I guess that's something that I don't really know because I've not played a ton of them, but it seems like the majority of the ones I've been introduced to have a lighter combat mechanic. And again, is that just the preference of the people who I'm learning the games from? Like Dan, you were saying, you probably lean away from the combat ones most of the time. And so since I'm learning the games from you and James and Nathan, maybe it's just not being introduced to a ton of the ones with combat. Though again, James loves Blood Rage as well. So and Twilight Imperium 4 does have some combat. It's just not the main focus.
Yeah, I would say the 3 of us are largely Eurogamers, and we do tend to like those. I kind of speaking for everywhere, but to kind of illustrate my point, we'll just talk about a game that is not considered an area control, which is either Battlecry or Memoir 44 is basically the same game. This is considered a combat game, but you are, in fact, taking control of the land. You are acquiring landmarks that are important to score points, but the game comes down to you win by generally killing enough units that you get enough points by, just wiping out the enemy. So that, while it is technically, if you look at it, there is area control in it, it is generally not considered to be because it's so combat focused. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And and as we were talking about doing this episode, I did go back to BGG a bunch and looked at that 1-sentence description that they give for area control games, and it says, multiple players occupying a space and gaining benefits based on their proportional presence in the space. And all of a sudden I was like, well, then is Dune really one? Because if there are two people in the same region in Dune, you fight, and then there's only one of you left. So, like, you know, in this description, it's saying that you can occupy the same space, and then, due to your proportional presence, gain benefits. In Dune, you don't get to do that. You join a space with another person, and then you combat until there's only one of you left in that space. And Scythe, my understanding, is the same. But of course, again, that's where I feel like there's a mixture of multiple styles of gaming happening, where, you know, it's not just area control, area management. There's other stuff happening, and it's just a part of the game, if that makes any sense.
I think you hit on something here, Pete, because as you pointed out, Scythe and Dune and probably some of these other games on my list here, definitely Twilight Imperium 4th edition, players can't cohabitate a space and both gain benefits. Matter of fact, now that I'm looking at my list, I'm not sure if there's any games where players can cohabitate a space and both gain benefits. Spirit Island, maybe?
So I'm wondering, like, how many games on my list, or maybe on Dan's list, are going to be what you would consider to be, I guess, purely area control or area management, or just games that have area control as an aspect of the game. So El Grande, which we played, is definitely area control. Everybody can have pieces in the same place. They're not going to fight and remove pieces unless, you know, you play like a special card or move some pieces around. You can adjust them or send them back to their province or whatever. But most of the time, you're going to cohabitate, like it says here, and you're going to gain benefits proportional to your presence. And another game that definitely has some of this, or definitely has this, that I just recently played for the very first time, again online using the digital edition, was Twilight Struggle. And so you can definitely have both players cohabitating in the same region with their influence, and depending on the level of influence, let you know if someone controls the place or has dominance in the area. But again, there's not a ton of the just straight up, there's no like combat really. I mean, there's a little bit of like you can coup and knock somebody out of the region, but that's like one of the only other games that I've played that I feel El Grande is largely area control, area management. Whereas most of the other games on my list, like you were saying, Scythe, Blood Rage, Dune, it's area control is an aspect of it, but it's not the entire game.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that break it down into two sections, which I think is helpful. So you got area majority and area control. So area majority is where you can cohabitate and you get points based on how much you have there, or points by, sometimes it's only the place or person with the most gets points. Area control, it's almost more you're controlling individual regions in order to have majority over the entire map. So you're fighting for majority control of this greater area and actually winning the game by, you know, having more control, more regions you control.
So like Dune's more like an area control rather than area majority.
Right, as is Scythe and Blood Rage, if you think about it.
Right.
One example from my list of a game where only the player in first place gets the benefit is like Godfather Corleone's Empire. At the end of each round, you sort of count up the workers in each zone to determine who is the leader. And if someone is the leader and not tied for the leader, they get to put their token on the board and then they get a benefit. Anybody who goes to any of those locations in that area with a thug, they take a free action, that action that they just triggered. But there's no benefit for second place there. And there's definitely some form of conflict mechanism, since you can perform hit missions to knock units into the Hudson River and clean off the areas so that they don't count at the end of the round.
And it's Eric Lang, so James, of course, would side with you and say this is a great game. And I agree with you too. So, Godfather, as far as like the look of it, that's also for Eric Lang. That's definitely not his most attractive looking game, but it's mechanically very sound and it's a very solid game that I really enjoy. It actually has several layers to the area control, so you have controlling benefits for controlling a region that compound throughout the rounds, because once you control a region, next round if somebody uses the ability in that region, you get a benefit.
And then if you have the most control markers in a region at the end, you get a victory point buff, I believe.
Yes. I have another non-traditional area control that's also an older game to talk about, which is Tigris and Euphrates by Knizia. It's a really abstract war game where you are laying tiles of 4 different colors, but you can only score for laying tiles if you have the appropriately colored leader. Now that gets complicated by if somebody puts the same colored leader in the region you're in, then you then have an internal war, or if they combine 2 regions by placing a tile, you then have an external war with all matching colors. So you could actually have 4 people suddenly involved in a war all at the same time. And the person who placed the tile just gets to decide what order those wars come in. And typical Knizia is the color that you scored the least in is their actual points. So later in the game, it really encourages you to do combat because you get a lot of points by destroying through external war. You destroy a lot of pieces of a specific color, and you get points for every piece you destroy. It's a really solid, classic abstract strategy game that I really like, and it comes with a few modules that add a little variety to it. Have either of you played this one?
I have not.
It's one that some people badmouth just mainly because most of the people that do badmouth admit that they liked it when it came out, and it sounds like, from what I've heard, a lot of people just overplayed it and got tired of it. But, if you get tired of it from overplaying it, that's kind of saying it's a good game, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's a good game and you're tired of it for now, you take a break from it for a little bit, and then maybe one day you come back to it again because it's a good game, would be my assumption.
And personally, I don't think I'll ever get tired of this game. It can be a really nasty game. It's a game that you can place a piece, and suddenly there will be multiple wars, and huge swaths of the map are just wiped out. So it is constantly evolving the map, and it can be a little AP because by your turn, the map might have significantly changed, and suddenly your plans are completely out the window. Yeah, it's a very strong game.
So I guess a question I was going to ask, maybe you guys know the answer, would be with some genre of games, with some mechanisms, there is a designer to look to. So like for me, I don't know a lot of designers, but I'm starting to get some names that pop up here or there. I know James talks a lot about Uwe Rosenberg, and it seems like he has done he has a couple mechanics that he has really delved deep into to try to make multiple games using the same mechanic, trying to, I guess, make the game that really grasps that idea of that mechanic. And I know I've played, personally, I like legacy games, I like the thematic stuff, so I know that I've played a lot of Rob Daviau games. So, for area control or area management style games, do either of you know if somebody's looking to get into those games and they want to like dive into a designer, is there a game designer out there who has like done something similar with this style of game? I have no idea. I just thought I would throw that out there and ask.
Well, James would mention Eric Lang, and that would be accurate.
Okay, all right. So
he's done a couple for sure.
Okay, because I knew. Okay, so I know Eric Lang. I know Blood Rage for sure. What's some of the other ones that he has done that's delved into this mechanic?
Rising Sun, of course.
Okay.
Ankh, even Godfather has an element of it in it.
And yeah, that's more, all his games do focus a little bit more on the area control as opposed to the area majority. But if you're talking about area majority, it's just been around for so long, and there's been so many games made using it, it's really hard to credit one designer that would stand out among them.
Okay. Well,
James might be able to think of something. James knows designers a lot more than I do.
I mean, again, I know that I don't usually go out and like search out a specific designer. I find the game first, but I'm sure there are some people out there who like to follow the careers of certain designers, and so I didn't know if there was like a standout person for area control or area management. But again, it does sound like for area control, Eric Lang has, at least we just named 4 there that he has done. So
yeah, I kind of, designers are almost like, if you're listening to music, I can't really name the members of the band. I know some people really get into that. I kind of look at it almost the same thing. It's like, if it's a really standout game, I might note the designer, but for most games, because it's a lot of the times it's a team collaborative thing. The designer is just one element of it. Yeah, you can tell Ryan Lockett, since he basically does everything himself, you know his games. But when it's team that's designing and producing and publishing this game, it doesn't seem to me that the designer stands out as much.
Okay. I mean, I definitely have noticed it seems like a lot of games are collaborative. Usually under the designer header, you'll see a couple of names or a few names. And then even then, I'm sure there are people that aren't being credited as designer but are in there somewhere else doing something for the game.
Yeah.
So,
and that's been, to a large degree, something that's been a change in modern gaming. There's more people involved in designing a game, whereas, the older games, it was a single person that does almost all the work. Knizia's name stands out a lot because, he's one of the grandfathers of board game design, and he was around when, it was nobody else was doing it, or very few people were doing it.
Yeah, designer is important for sure, but definitely there are other people involved. It takes a small village. There's a developer, there's an artist, there's a graphic artist, there's somebody who writes the rules. Granted, some of these responsibilities could be shared towards a smaller number of people, but somebody's got to do it all.
And you mentioned, the graphic design, and I think that's a position that's really under talked about. That's not really a good way of phrasing it, but to me, graphic design is really important. To be able to look at the game and have a sense of how to play it just by, looking at the board or looking at your player mats, that's really helpful and makes it so much easier to teach.
I will second that.
So just going to throw this one out there as well. First, thinking about area control and area management games, first thing that came to mind is one of the first games I really have many memories playing. Not that I think it's a great game, but I think a lot of people out there, I think a lot of people listening will have played it probably at least once in their life and probably thought this game takes way too long, and so they don't play it anymore. Area control, you have to go to your childhood memory of playing Risk for 5, 7, 8 hours, right?
Okay. Yeah, until you said started going into how long it was, I thought you were going for Carcassonne, but Risk makes
I'm
sense.
talking about when I was real young, or my early teens at the latest, I guess, starting to play Risk with my friends. And again, this is where I at times hated that game because everything is on rolling dice, and I suck at rolling dice. But area control and Risk, that is the entire game.
Right, and you even get bonuses for camping in Australia and walling yourself in. You get a couple extra armies every round. You can push out of Australia into other places, and
I just had to throw it out there because I was like, if there's an area control game that a large group of people have probably all of them have played, a lot of people have probably played Risk at some point in their life. Yep. I just assume.
Oh yeah.
Hey, do we want to tear apart Risk? This is a legitimate question. Should we take a minute here to tear apart Risk and play out all its faults?
I would love to hear some actual discussion on the game of Risk, a game that I enjoyed quite a bit at a young age, but no longer have a huge desire to play.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting thing. Risk is a lot like Monopoly in that very few people have actually read the rules. Most people were taught the rules by somebody else who was taught it by somebody else, and there's a lot of different ways of playing Risk now because of that, because people get things wrong and it just spreads. How those card combos work, I'm not even sure what the real rule is because I've heard so many different rules. I played that when I was young, we played that it was exponentially growth, so every time you play a card combo, the next person would get doubled, then quadrupled, and then it would get to the point where people are getting so many from card combos they can just go from having one country to sweeping the entire board, which doesn't seem like the right way to play it.
The growing armies from the card combos, as far as I'm aware, is a thing in the game. I couldn't tell you the numbers off the top of my head for sure because it's been so long since I played this, but it's in there to ensure that the game comes to a reasonable conclusion, because eventually somebody turns in their cards for so many armies, they're going to take 90% of the board, and the other player is not going to be able to come back from that, and they're just going to get crushed under the heel. Either that or they're going to trade in cards. Somebody's going to trade in cards and wipe out everybody else that turn that they trade in cards because they've just got 30 armies or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, my problem was that was always it invalidated the rest of the game. So the only thing that ended up mattering was who held on to the card combos for the longest.
Well, I don't know how you played, but we played that I think once you had 5 cards, you had to exchange because they appeared in 3-card sets.
That would make sense. Unfortunately, that's not how we played it. That would definitely mitigate that effect of everybody holding
here we
on
go.
to the cards.
We played it differently. Me and Nathan played it differently. Pete, how'd you play this?
Again, it's been so long, I don't even remember until Nathan mentioned there were cards in the game. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot there were even cards in that game. So yeah, I literally don't remember well enough anymore. Other than that, I think I had that one experience where I played a game that took 7 or 8 hours, and I think that was the last time I ever played Risk.
Yeah, because you play until all players are eliminated, last man standing.
Like, I was
right?
hoping, in the end, I was really hoping I rolled bad. I just wanted it to be over. So
Right, and the dice rolling mechanism limits the number of armies that can fight at one time. The attacker can only roll 3 dice, and the defender only rolls 2 dice. So, if the defender wins or gets higher numbers on their 2 dice, then the attacker only loses 2 armies each time you toss. And if you're attacking with 15 armies, it's going to take you a lot of rolls in order to resolve that combat.
It can take a while.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the limitations of the game is that it did not have clean, easy to resolve conflict when conflict was the primary mechanism of the game, for sure.
Yeah, and it could be quite frustrating when towards the end of the game, somebody's turn is taking 10, 20, 30 minutes because they have so many units, and you're just sitting there getting beat down, hoping you have a few units left to survive so you can play your card combo and hopefully recover everything you lost. Well...
Yeah, I never thought we'd go into Risk here, but I'm glad we did.
Absolutely, I'm glad that you guys were willing to talk about it a little bit.
It's certainly an older title from a different design period / perspective,
right?
And it has its fault. I imagine it's from that same area or same era where we had a slew of games where multiplayer, last player standing wins. The other players in the game sort of act as a natural hammer to hammer down the high peg, which unintentionally or intentionally lengthens the length of the game. And that's a good thing because this game is a pastime or something used to waste time and not something you necessarily want to reach a good conclusion in a half hour to 2 hours.
Oh yeah, if my parents wanted to get rid of me for hours, go play Risk. And here's something I hadn't really thought about is, like you're saying, it's from a different era, a different time. We just played El Grande, which is from 1995, which we consider at this point to be an older game. Risk is from 1959. So, game design obviously had to look different. This is a game from the late 50s, almost into the early 60s. So I can't tell you how many games I would have played from that era. But again, it does say something that today you can walk into a Target and you will be able to find at least one of a billion different varieties of the game Risk on the shelf. It's still there. It's still easy to buy. It's still affordable. People play this game. So something about it sticks around. It might be nostalgia. I don't know.
Yeah, a mixture of nostalgia and staying power, right? There's also the fact that it's an entirely different market. El Grande is still a hobby market game, despite the fact that it has been on the market for a good number of years and will probably remain there, unless it might fall out of print periodically while they whip up a new edition or a new printing, as the case may be. But Risk is not a part of the hobby market; it's part of the mass market. It's moved around and it's in stores because it basically sells like a toy.
Yeah, it was also before what made most people consider the golden age of gaming, which I think most people consider that about 30 years ago, where we entered hobby gaming started to exist, and large numbers of quality games were starting to be designed, where when Risk came out, there wasn't really any competition, and most games nobody ever heard of. It's just a few games that were really heavily marketed that ever made to the consciousness of the people, and because they didn't have competition, they didn't have to be that complicated or that well thought out necessarily. I'm sure lots of people would disagree with me on that. There are many people that think Risk is an excellent game. It's really, the perfect game, but it's...
We've probably made somebody mad.
Yes.
But it'll be okay. It'll be okay. So I guess the only other thing that, as I was thinking about this whole topic, that I wanted to know is, because I always want to know what games to be on the lookout for, but what is an area control, area management game that you've not played yet, that you know about, that you really want to play? I've got one, but I'd like to know some more from you guys. What should I be on the lookout for, or what are you on the lookout for to play?
I've played a lot of them. One that I have played that I would really recommend is Star Wars Rebellion. Although
it is the number one on my list.
The area control, area majority is a relatively minor part of that game.
Okay.
But it is a really excellent two-player game that has a lot of tension. If you liked Twilight Struggle, I think you'll like Star Wars Rebellion a lot too.
Okay, yeah, because Star Wars Rebellion is the number one game that I have on my list of for this mechanic, or 4 games that I'm like, I want to play this at some point.
Definitely, I want to try Shogun because it's one of the 3 games in existence that uses a cube tower, and I want to play with a cube tower.
I love your reasoning. I love it.
Now,
I've heard of Shogun. Yeah. I've heard of it, but I don't really know much about it. So
it just made me add Age of Empires 3, Age of Discovery to my list. That was a thing that happened a little while ago.
I haven't played Shogun, but I have played Wallenstein, which is Shogun is basically Wallenstein set in Japan, but they revised some of the rules. Of course, they went back and revised those same rules in Wallenstein, so a lot of those things got added back in. But yeah, Wallenstein also has a dice tower, and the nice element I like about Wallenstein, which I believe is in Shogun as well, is there are, I believe, 10 actions that everybody gets to take, and those actions are in a random order, and then at the beginning of the turn, you will flip 5 of those actions and put the other 5 face down. So you're planning your turn only knowing when 5 of your actions will happen. The other 5, you kind of have to hedge your bets and guess when they might happen, and if they happen in the wrong order, it can kind of screw up your plan. So things like getting money taxes from province, you may need to do that before you can do the action that allows you to build a structure or buy more units, but you may not know when that's going to happen in the turn order. So it is a very interesting twist to it's a mechanic I've never seen it anywhere else.
Some of the ones that are in this category that I have had a go at, I played Eclipse a good while ago when it first came out. That is like a 4X style game, but it's also an economy management game, strangely enough. I owned Endeavor Age of Sail for a bit, and I think I've donated that one to the Tabletop Gaming Guild library. So if anybody wants to try that down the road when we can meet in person again, so that's a solid one. I still own Tiny Epic Galaxies. BGG says this is an area control game. I mean, it is, because you're racing down these planet tracks to take control of the planets and add them to your tableau, but it's not as splashy as any of the other ones, I guess. I own Lords of Vegas, where you're building hotels or casinos in Vegas. That's actually very cool, how players have to viciously fight for control of these casinos. Near the end of the game, it's like a knife fight in a phone booth. It's great.
A knife fight in a phone booth has now sold me.
Yeah. But a game that I have not tried yet, I really want to try, I forget what the other version of this game is called. A Gaia Project is like the sci-fi version. I think there's a medieval fantasy version, right?
Terra Mystica.
Terra Mystica is the medieval fantasy version. Yeah. I want to try one of these 2 games at some point.
Yeah, I'll have Terra Mystica. I can show you that one at some point.
I know that it's a very heavy game, though, so I actually downloaded the rule book for it. I think Gaia Project, started reading it and gave up halfway through. It was reasonably badly done.
Well, there's one that I'm curious about trying that you mentioned by accident a couple of times, which should be Lagrangia, but I don't know if it really is that. I mean, they call it an area control in BGG, but I don't know if there is much of an element, is there?
So Lagrangia uses multi-use cards and involves, you're building effectively a farm with these cards. So, you can put a card on the left side of your board, in which case it's a field and it will grow crops. You can put a card on the right side of your board, and that improves your general economy. It can give you extra card draws, money per round, or space for pigs. So there are 3 different things that can be on those cards. And then the cards can slide underneath your board to be special servants that have unique player powers. And then they can go on the top of your board and be market barrows, which are basically contracts that you have to fill. And that's where the area control comes in. If you have a market barrow that you fulfill, you get to put one of your markers on the central board. So if you fulfilled one that's worth 2 points, you collect 2 points, and you put your marker on a 2. The thing is those numbers go up to 6, and when you put your marker out on a 5, for example, you remove each other player's marker that is on a number next to yours that is on a less than a 5. And you get extra victory points for the markers that you managed to remove. And at the beginning of each round, you get a victory point or maybe it's the end, but you get a victory point for each marker that you have in the central map. So you're fighting for space in this market, effectively, is how the area control works.
No, another one I've heard a lot about that sounds really good, but I'm not too clear on how it plays, is Bunny Kingdom. Now, I just like the fact that it's supposed to be a really nasty, cutthroat game that's featuring bunnies.
Wait, now I have to look this up to see if the art is terrible. Oh, they're looking at the art is not terrible. Amazing.
No. You don't know? You haven't heard about this game?
I have not heard about this game. Nope.
Oh, I just like, the idea of having bunnies build up your kingdom and prepare for potential conflict.
Absolutely. Adorable bunnies build cities, harvest carrots, and go on missions to be big ears. I like it. No, the art's good. I like that. That is a heck of a ton of bunny minis.
There does seem to be a lot of bunny minis. I imagine that's how you control areas.
Getting back on topic, I didn't earlier mention Carcassonne, and I think people might get upset. Some people might get upset if we don't really talk about Carcassonne in this. Now, Carcassonne, I think most hobby gamers have played at some point. It's a tile placement game with indirect area control. So basically, when you place a tile, you can put a meeple down to claim the tile either as a castle, or claim the road, or claim the farm. But you can never place a meeple that would directly conflict with somebody. However, you can place a meeple and then later place a tile that would bring those regions together. So in the end game scoring, now you're actually looking at who has majority in the area.
Yeah, there's definitely some strategic conflict that you are focusing on, especially with your farmers.
This is a game that, when it came out, I played when I first got introduced to it, I played a lot of it. I don't play it as much as I used to, but unlike games like Settlers or Catan, if somebody were to pull this out, I wouldn't hesitate to play it. I haven't, killed this game by overplaying it yet.
No, this is a game that, again, one of my earlier introductions into hobby gaming, and I have gone out of my way to introduce other people to this game to get them into playing board games more often. I've done this with the teenagers at the library that I work at. Whenever we had game days, this was one of the games that I wanted to bust out first, because it's a very easy game to teach and to learn. There's just the right amount of strategy for a first time hobby game. Like we said, as you can start to strategically lay out the tiles so that by the end of the game, you have this massive field and you have the most farmers in it. It's a fun game, and I'm with you, Nathan. It's a game that if someone pulled it out, I would not hesitate to sit down and play a game of Carcassonne.
I would definitely recommend this to anybody who's in my store as an introductory level tile laying game. It's on my bestsellers rack, so I'm not going to say too much else about this one. You guys have covered it.
And if people want to find out more about other area control games that we mentioned earlier, you can watch our playthrough of El Grande. You can watch our playthrough of Scythe. You can check out my...
We have one or two playthroughs of Godfather on the channel, right?
Yeah, we do. You have my review of Dominant Species and my how to play on that.
We did our playthrough of Dune as well.
Yeah. We had an episode specifically on Twilight Imperium.
Went into a deep dive on that, Dune, and Scythe. So yeah, we've actually talked about a decent number of games that have this element in them already.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of my favorite mechanics. And so it does come up quite a lot in a lot of our episodes.
All right. And we've mentioned Eric Lang and Blood Rage, so James should be smiling from wherever he is.
We can't go an episode even when he's not here without talking about Eric Lang. Well, with that we should bring this episode to a close. Thank you for listening, and hope you join us again at Tabletop Gaming Guild. Thank you for listening. If you have any feedback for us, feel free to visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Board Game Geek Guild 2989, or our website at tabletopgamingguild.com. And don't forget to like, follow, and or subscribe. Tabletop Gaming Guild is a product of Tabletop Gaming Guild, LLC. All rights reserved.